Muhyiddin Qadur, good evening. It's a pleasure to have you here tonight with us on Adiga TV for this exclusive interview with your kind self.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Dr. Muhyiddin, would you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, I am Adiga, Cherkess. I was born in the Muhajirin district of Amman. I spent my youth there, and I went to my first school, Asbaliya school. At about age 8, my father thought I should go to a boarding school to teach me some discipline. And I went to the Friends Boys School in Ramallah and graduated from there. And then after that, I went to America for my university, college and university graduate studies. The way I went to Hollywood is an interesting story, actually, because I was working at the time in advertising. One of the biggest advertising agencies in New York, J. Walter Thompson. I was doing there advertising films and documentaries. While at J. Walter Thompson, 1969, I wrote my very first novel. It was called The Skyjack Affair. And it was published by a small publishing company in New York, not a big one, called the Williams Press. Maybe they printed 10,000 or 15,000 copies, which is nothing in America. Mm-hmm. But strangely enough, one day I received a call from Mr. Ziegler from Los Angeles, asking me if I had an agent to represent me. And I said, no, I don't have an agent. This is my first work. He closed the line. Next day, he called me again and said, okay, you don't have an agent. We are interested to make your novel into a film. We would like to discuss buying the rights to your film, to your story, to your novel. Could you come to Los Angeles? I said, of course, just send me the ticket. And in 2 days, they sent me the ticket. TWA called me, and I flew to Los Angeles. I was met there, I would say, like a VIP. You know, I think the idea was to impress me. I mean, I was met at the airport by a limousine. In my imagination, it was like 20 meters long. It had about 4 or 5 doors. And the driver, Sam, said, please. And I didn't know which door to sit in. So I went and sat next to him, the driver. And he took me to Fox. At the gate, there was a beautiful woman who met me. And again, she introduced me to the studios. She took me around to show me the studio. And I was really impressed because I saw Ava Gardner reading a script in the, walking around. I saw Bob Mitchum, Robert Mitchum, with a cup of coffee walking around. Gary Cooper, big names. And I was really impressed. Then the girl took me to the administration building to meet the people responsible. I thought, since they were buying my book, I thought I would meet the head of the studio. At that time, there were 2 heads, Richard Zanuck and David Brown. I didn't meet these 2. I didn't even meet their assistant or the assistant of their assistant. I met an old woman sitting in a cubicle, small cubicle in a big hall full of cubicles. And she had on the table something like 22 pages. and she had a check in her hand. She said, read the contract. If you agree with everything, sign it, and this check will be yours. I looked at the number on the check, and I didn't have to read anything. I signed everything quickly. She gave me a check, which in those days was quite a lot of money. I mean, it was worth like 3 or 4 years of salaries in New York. So I immediately sent resignation from my company, and I said, I'm staying in Los Angeles, rented a flat. I rented a flat in a compound, a building with a swimming pool in the middle. I was told this was like a filmmaker's haven. I mean, everybody who lived there was either a writer or an actor or a producer or a director. So I rented a flat on the second floor, and I started thinking of myself as, you know, I'm in the film business. Next door to me was an actor. I don't know if you people will recall, a big guy called Clint Walker. He was playing in cowboy films. And Clint saw me writing. I was now writing. I wanted to write screenplays. And he said, you know, what are you doing? I said, I'm writing screenplays. I want to get into this business. He said, nobody will read your screenplay. You have to be in the unions, the writers' union. And you cannot be a director also unless you're in the directors' union. They're called DGA and WGA, Writers Guild of America, Directors Guild of America. So I said, okay, well, I went to the unions, and they didn't give me any time at all. They just didn't even want to talk to me. I was very depressed. I had a friend I had known in New York, a big name in those days, a big director called John Huston. John, well, we knew each other because of riding horses. I mean, we were not friends, but he was interested in my background as a Circassian from southern Russia and all this. And he said, if you come to Hollywood, give me a call. We'll have lunch together. And he gave me his telephone. So I called him. I found his number and I called him. And I told him, John, I don't know what to do. I can't get into the film business without being in the union. Can you help? And John said, well, I'll try. I know the director of the Screen Actors Guild. Maybe he can help us. So he took me to the SAG office, and the director there was Ronald Reagan at the time. You know, he later became president of the United States. And Ronald Reagan couldn't even unlock that door. So I was stuck. John was planning to make a big film. The title of it was Night of the Iguana, with a big, huge actors. And he said, look, Moy, instead of wasting your time here, come down with me. You'll see how films are made. You'll learn something. And you'll have a good time. We're going to have a lot of good-looking girls around. But I can't pay you because you are not in the union. I said, that's fine. That's fine. We went down to Puerto Vallarta in Mexico and spent about 2 months, a little over 2 months, working with him as an unofficial assistant, but really learning the business, learning how things are done. And it was really the school that I had in filmmaking. I mean, I learned how to solve problems, because filmmaking, I realized, is solving problems, all of it.
I see. So this first movie that you were part of was shot in Mexico.
Yes.
And as you mentioned to me that this studio in Mexico actually is like, there's collaboration between it and the Universal Studios.
Universal Studios. Yes. Cherubusco Studios had an agreement with Universal Studios, exchanging services. And John told me that if I could make a film at Cherubusco Studios, it would be accepted as my ticket into the unions, because it would be like as if I made it at Universal. He introduced me to two very important filmmakers called the Galindo brothers. I went to Cherubusco, and there was a director called Servando Gonzalez. He was making a film called Yanko, about a young boy who plays violin. And when he realized that I am a violinist also, I play violin, he was very happy, because the boy didn't know how to hold the violin, how to make move. So I did all that for him. I became a co-director on this film. And when the film was finished, it was my ticket to enter the unions. I got into the unions. Well, once I got into the unions, then it was possible for me to work, to earn money, because the money I made from the book would not last forever. So I was lucky to be chosen first for a Bonanza episode. That involved going to a place, to a ranch actually in Nevada called Ponderosa. And we went there, and I did the first 3 or 4 episodes of Bonanza there. And that got me into the circle of being a TV director. And later on, I did some Mannix series. And after that, I set up my own company, production company, Sintel Productions. And we did a film called The Spectre of Edgar Allan Poe. It was about Edgar Allan Poe's life. The film, surprisingly, made a lot of money, because it became a popular film in the drive-in theaters in America. Every year they would repeat this film. And I think the film also came to Jordan, traveled throughout the Middle East, because I know a friend of mine from Lebanon called me once, Jojo Shamshoum, his name, he's in the film business. He said, "I saw your film in Beirut." It was quite, well, I don't know if I could call it an achievement, but it was a breakthrough for me. And in 1974, I left Hollywood. The reason I left was because of what happened in the Middle East. I think you recall Henry Kissinger going to Saudi Arabia and the price of oil quadrupling from something like $4 or $5 a barrel to $18 a barrel. The Saudis had a lot of money, and they started building infrastructures, hospitals, roads, everything. And I had a friend in Washington called Dr. Patrick. He enticed me. He said, "Come, you're wasting your time playing in Hollywood. Come, let's make a company and go to Saudi Arabia and do some business, serious business." So I went to Washington. We set up a company called HIDCO, Health International Development Corporation. And we specialized in supplying healthcare equipment to the Saudi Ministry of Health, to the hospitals. That's how I left Hollywood.
So after that, after 1974, when was your coming back to the movie industry?
I think before coming back to the film business, I really went very seriously into writing novels. In the 1990s, I began. It became an obsession with me. I used to average one novel a year, and I remember some years I even wrote 2 novels. It was like an obsession. That's all I did, is writing novels. And my novels took off. They sold very well in all the English language world, you know,
Yes.
UK, America, Canada, and Australia.
Yes.
And later on, some of them were translated into Spanish, Arabic, French, and German. So I became known as an author, as a writer.
Beautiful. So a part of your work as an author, you focused on the Circassian legacy and the Circassian culture and literature mainly. Would you like to tell us about this part?
Yes, I thought, in fact, I was looking at my list last night, and I discovered that I have written 20 novels, all about the Caucasus, Circassian and other nationalities. My first novel, which was the Kafka's trilogy, it was 3 books, was published in England, and then published in America, and then published in Russia. And in Russia it became a bestseller. Of course, it was sold very well in Nalchik in the Caucasus, but I was surprised, really surprised, that the Russians liked it also. They read, I mean, the sales were enormous to me. For me, it was big sales. And that decided me to continue writing. There's a story behind my writing. There's a story. When I finished my PhD in Claremont University, one of my teachers, one of my examiners, was a famous author, famous writer, James Michener. He had written huge novels, and he liked the dissertation, what I wrote, and it was about Muridism, Muridiyya, you know, the Shamil story, Sheikh Shamil story in Dagestan and Chechnya. And he said, Mohi, he said, this will probably be published as a documentary book, but where will it go? It will go to the libraries and maybe to some bookstores, but it'll stay collecting dust on the rough. The only people who will read it are people who are interested in that subject to research. It becomes a research reference. Why don't you write it as a novel? If you write it as a novel, thousands will buy it, you know, maybe millions. And at that time, I was not convinced, because it was very prestigious to have a documentary book, you know, a book that was a document. But when I started wanting to write about the Caucasus, the history of the Chechen and the Circassians and the Russian-Caucasian wars, I remembered what Michener told me, and I changed it to a novel, historical novel, and he was absolutely right. He was absolutely right. It was a big success.
Beautiful.
After that, it was just a question of finding themes, interesting themes to write about.
The success in novel writing has also produced to us one of the recent events that happened in Turkey. The
Yes,
what-
the plot.
talking about the plot, yes.
The
Talking
plot.
about the cope.
Attempted
The attempt
assassin-
of yes.
attempted-
Could you tell us
to-
about this part?
Yes, that was very interesting because in 2015, on the 15th of July, I think it was, I arrived in Istanbul. The day, actually, it happened the following day. It just happened accidentally, really, that I am there. I was flying back from Europe. I always flew, when I came to Jordan, I always flew through Istanbul because I have friends there and I always stop for a day or two. It was quite an experience because on that night, the day I arrived in Istanbul, I went to my flat. I have a small flat there. And I was tired. So I went to sleep. I put the alarm at 9 o'clock to come down and have dinner. But I was awakened by a lot of noise, real noise, I went to the window and looked down, and in Istanbul, flats, buildings are next to each other and there's small roads between them. And in every window, there were women holding kitchen things and banging on them. I looked down at the street and there were thousands of people walking, carrying flags and singing. I thought, maybe there was a big celebration of an occasion or something. But at the corner, I saw a tank. And then this street leads to Alaskar Caddesi, which is the big main road that goes to Taksim Square. I saw thousands of people walking towards Taksim. I came down to the reception, the building, and the man stopped me. He said, no, it's dangerous. Don't go out. And they were watching television on their telephone. So he showed me what they were watching. And it was one of the bridges on the Bosphore. There were tanks, soldiers shooting. There were quite a few people dead on the bridge. And I realized something was happening unusual. So I went back up and I called a friend of mine in Ankara, Muhaddin Unal, who was the head of the Casa, the Circassian Casa there. And he told me, yes, where are you? I said, I'm in Istanbul. He said, get out of the country, quickly. I said, why? He said, because there may be civil war. You would be caught. Get out. And, I have the character of a newspaper man, So instead of going out, I went to Ankara. I went to where the problems were. And then I called him from Ankara hotel. The hotel I stayed at was always not far from his house. I called him and I said, I'm here. So I said, oh, you're crazy, but stay there, stay in the hotel, I'll come. He came, we had dinner, and he told me something of what was happening. Now, Muhaddin Unal's brother, younger brother, was the top general in the Air Force. And of course he would know, he would have some information. So I asked him if I could meet him. I wanted to So I immediately thought of writing something, came to my mind, and I wanted to get some information. 2 days later, I think, he called me and said, come. I went to his house for lunch, and his brother was there. Abdin Unal was sitting there with his military thing. And I asked him, I said, give me some information. What's happening? Who is trying this? What happened? And actually, Abdin Unal, the night of the coup, he was imprisoned. He was taken out of a wedding. And then in the morning, when the coup failed, he came out. He gave me some information. I wanted to meet the head of the MID. MID is like mukhabarat, intelligence. I knew his name, Hakan Fidan. And he told me nobody meets Hakan Fidan. But he has 5 assistants. You know, they're different departments. He said 3 of them are Circassian. You can meet one of them. I'll have you meet one of them. And I got a lot of information. I stayed 2 weeks in Ankara, writing, making notes, prepared everything for the book. And I wrote the book very quickly after that because I was in the middle of it. I saw everything. I mean, I met generals, I met people from the Ministry of Interior. I met soldiers who were involved actually in the thing. So I got a lot of information that many newspaper people didn't have.
Indeed.
A lot of secret information.
Yes. So you're not only inside the event itself, but also you were inside the core of what's happening, and you took the opportunity to write it down into a novel.
Yes.
Moving to another part of your work, one of the remarkable achievements is the Circassian movie.
My wife and I I wrote the screenplay, and we had some trouble getting financing for it because I didn't want to make a small film. I wanted to make a big film, a film that could go international. And eventually we financed it, and we made it in Jordan. It is probably the only Jordanian film that got international distribution. I mean, it was distributed in 64 countries. I made Muhammad al-Abbadi laugh the other day because he was in the film, and they sent me a clip of him speaking Chinese. You know, they dubbed it in China into Chinese. It's a successful film.
Indeed.
It really did very well. And I received letters from places like Australia saying, who are these Cherkess? You know, we never heard of them. We don't know them.
Yes.
They have a culture which is completely different from anything we know. So the film had a big effect in exposing our culture worldwide. I mean, a film is worth 1,000 books because the books are read by specific people, whereas a film is seen by many people.
Indeed. Yeah, thank you very much for this, for the movie, definitely. It has widespread, and definitely it shows the culture through your perspective. And it's vitally important, definitely, because you are Circassian yourself. And this is the best way to show this culture, I mean, to understand the culture and how to represent it on the big screen. So thank you very much, Dr. Mahi. We would like to ask you, what are your future plans? What's next?
What's next? Well, in terms of film, we are preparing to shoot a film in April next year called Jabir. and it takes place in Wadi Musa and Petra. It's a very interesting concept that is in the Quran as well as in the Bible. When the Jews came out of Egypt to Sinai, they went into the valley for water, looking for water into the valley, which later they called after their prophet Wadi Musa. And it's mentioned in both religions. It's fiction in a way, but based on some historical background. But the story takes place today. It's not a historical thing. It takes place today. And I think and we're hoping it will have international distribution, because we have some interesting foreign actors in it. Like Nick Nolte, you know, the American actor.
Yes.
Ed Ward from England. We have Ali Bastian, she's a big actress in England. I mean, we're still talking to even bigger names, like Helen Hunt, for example, an American actress, big name, A-class. She might be interested. So we're preparing this film to be another Cherkess, you know, to be like Cherkess, to get international distribution. More importantly, Jordan has never had a film enter into the Oscars. Never. I mean, there's a film called Deep, but that was a British film. It was made in Britain, and it was entered as a British film into the Oscars, not as a Japan. It was shot in Jordan. So this we're hoping to, if we can manage to get it finished with good quality production, it'll go into the Oscars as a Jordanian film in 2019.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
We wish you all the success, and definitely we'll be waiting for that with
Inshallah.
eagerness.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.